Hello everybody, I am your host for this evening, Cain, and what we're going to be reading is going to be Story 1, Lilith, the Mother of Blood. So let's jump right into it. Before Eve, there was Lilith, not created from Adam's rib, but from the same earth, equal, wild, and untamed. When she refused to submit to Adam, she was cast out of Eden, alone, vengeful, and exiled. Lilith wandered into the dark deserts where fallen angels found her. Seduced by their forbidden knowledge, she bore their hybrid offspring, monstrous creatures, half spirit, half flesh. These were the first true predators of mankind. Consuming blood to sustain their cursed souls, they hid in the shadows, watching mankind multiply. Lilith became a goddess to them, queen. Legends say she still visits sleeping men in the night, draining their life, whispering ancient curses. And when the first infant dies unexpectedly, mid-cry, some whisper Lilith's name. Beware the desert winds, they carry her voice still. There are many things that have fascinated humans throughout history. Some of those things include death, war, magic, and the unknown. It is said that one of the best ways to learn about these fascinating subjects is through stories. There are many different types of stories that have been told about them over the years. Some are meant to entertain, while others are meant to teach a lesson or scare you. One story in particular that has been passed down through generations is the story of Lilith. Now, this story is not a happy one. In fact, it is quite sad and horrifying, but that is what makes it so interesting. This is the story of a woman who was abandoned by her husband and had to raise her children on her own. It is a story of survival, of strength, and of the lengths that a mother will go to protect her children. I remember the first time I heard this story. I was young, maybe 8 years old, and my mom was telling me a bedtime story. She started off the story like any other. Once upon a time, she said, there was a woman who lived in a small village. She was married to a man who was a hunter, and they had 2 children together. I listened intently as my mom continued the story. One day, the hunter went out into the forest to hunt, but he never came back. The villagers searched for him, but they could not find him anywhere. So the woman was left to raise her children on her own. She was strong and determined though, and she did not let this setback defeat her. I could not help but admire the woman's strength and determination. Despite losing her husband and being alone, she had not given up hope. She continued to work hard to provide for her children, and they eventually grew up into happy and healthy adults. As the story continued though, things took a turn for the worse. One day, one of the woman's sons went out into the forest and never came back. The mother was devastated, but she refused to give up. She went out into the forest herself to search for her son. For days she searched, but she could not find him anywhere. Finally, she came across a small cave, and as she approached it, she could hear a strange noise coming from inside. She cautiously entered the cave, and what she saw inside would haunt her forever. Inside the cave, the mother found her son, but he was not alive. He was dead. And surrounding him were strange symbols and markings that she had never seen before. The mother was horrified, but she knew that she needed to do something. She could not let her son die in vain. She began to research the cave and the symbols that she had seen inside. She wanted to find out what had happened to her son and how she could prevent it from happening to anyone else. Her research led her to an ancient text that spoke of a demon named Lilith, who lived in caves and lured young men inside using her hypnotic powers. According to the text, the only way to defeat Lilith was to use a special amulet that could block her powers. The mother was desperate, so she decided to take matters into her own hands. She traveled to a nearby town to find a skilled craftsman who could help her create the amulet. When the amulet was finished, the mother returned to the cave. She put on the amulet and confronted Lilith. The battle between the mother and Lilith was fierce, but in the end, the mother was victorious. She banished Lilith back to the underworld where she belonged. From that day forward, the mother was known as a hero. She had defeated a powerful demon and saved her son's life. And even though he had passed away, his sacrifice had not been in vain. His death had led his mother to become a legend. This story is truly a powerful one. It teaches us that no matter how difficult things may seem, we should never give up hope. The mother in the story is a great example of this. Despite everything she has been through, she never gives up. She is a strong and determined woman who will stop at nothing to protect her children. This story also teaches us that we should never underestimate the power of love. The mother's love for her son is what gives her the strength to defeat Lilith. Love is a powerful force that can overcome even the most difficult obstacles. If you are ever feeling down or hopeless, just remember the story of the mother and Lilith. Remember that no matter how difficult things may seem, you should never give up hope, and that love is the most powerful force in the world. The story of Lilith is a terrifying tale that has been passed down through generations. Kay tells the story of a woman who was abandoned by her husband and was forced to raise her children on her own. Lilith was a strong and independent woman, but she was also lonely and desperate for help. Unfortunately, she turned to the wrong source when she made a deal with the devil to help her provide for her family. This deal came with a terrible price though, and Lilith soon found herself trapped in a nightmare that she could not wake up from. Despite the odds being stacked against her, Lilith was not one to give up. She fought tooth and nail to try and protect her children from the darkness that was enveloping them. She tried to shield them from the truth of their father's betrayal and the evil that was growing inside of her. But as the story progressed, it became clear that the darkness was too strong and that Lilith's children were doomed to follow in their father's footsteps. As the story drew to a close, Lilith realized the gravity of her mistake. She had traded her soul for her children's future, and now they were all doomed to suffer for eternity. The story of Lilith is a cautionary tale about the dangers of desperation and the importance of fighting for what you believe in. It reminds us that even in the darkest of times, we should never give up hope, and that even the smallest spark of goodness can make a difference. Lilith may have lost in the end, but her story will continue to inspire and remind us to keep fighting for what is right. Thank you for listening to the story of Lilith. This story has been passed down through generations and has been told in many different ways. Each telling adds its own unique spin on the story, but the overall message remains the same. No matter how difficult things may seem, we should never give up hope, and that love is the most powerful force in the world. I hope you enjoyed the story, and I encourage you to share it with others so that the message can continue to be passed down for generations to come. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time. Once upon a time, long before the tale of Bram Stoker's Dracula, in the sun-drenched lands of ancient Italy, there lived a man named Ambrogio. Ambrogio was a humble traveler, a seeker of truth, a believer in the tales of the wandering gods who ruled over humanity. But fate, it seemed, had a cruel sense of humor, a twisted jest to play on the unsuspecting man. He had fallen head over heels in love with Selene, a beautiful maiden who served in the temple of Apollo, the god of music, poetry, and light. Their love was pure, their bond unbreakable. Or so they thought, until the day Ambrogio's world turned upside down. You see, Apollo, the radiant god with his lyre and golden chariot, was a jealous lover. And when he learned of Ambrogio's affection for his priestess, a dark cloud formed over his usually sunny face. Ambrogio, he boomed, his voice echoing with celestial power. Your love for Selena is a thorn in my side. Choose, mortal, to renounce your love or face the consequences. Ambrogio stood before Apollo, his heart a battleground of love and fear. To renounce his love for Selena was to renounce a part of his soul. But what choice did he have? The god Apollo was a force of nature, his wrath as scorching as the sun that he drove across the heavens. I cannot renounce my love, O god of light, Ambrogio said, his voice firm despite the tremor in his heart. Then so be it, thundered Apollo, his eyes flashing with celestial fire. From this day forth, sunlight shall burn your flesh as if it were parchment, and your kind shall forever walk in the shadows." With that, Apollo unleashed his wrath, bathing Ambrogio in an ethereal flame that seared his skin and scorched his soul. As the flames subsided, Ambrogio looked down at his hands. They were covered with blisters, his skin peeling as if burnt by a mortal fire. He stumbled back, gasping, shielding his eyes against the pain. And as the sun climbed higher in the sky, the pain intensified. He could feel his skin sizzling, his bones aching. It was as if the very essence of daylight was consuming him. Just then, a gentle hand touched his arm. Ambrogio turned to see Selina standing beside him, her eyes filled with concern. "Ambrogio, what has Apollo done to you?" she whispered, her voice laced with worry. With a trembling hand, Ambrogio gestured towards his burning skin. Selina gasped, her eyes widening in horror. "Do not worry, Ambrogio," she said, her voice firm. "I shall seek help from the queen of the hunt, Artemis." Without another word, Selina rushed away, her footsteps echoing in the now silent temple. Meanwhile, Ambrogio, left alone in the harsh glare of the sun, could only wait and suffer, his body screaming in agony. However, amidst his torment, a strange sensation began to take hold. It started as a whisper in his veins, a subtle pull towards the forest's embrace, and as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the land, he found himself drawn deeper and deeper into the woods, his feet moving almost without his conscious thought. Suddenly, the trees opened up, revealing a small clearing bathed in the ethereal glow of moonlight. In the center stood a magnificent doe, her eyes shining with an otherworldly light. As Ambrogio stepped into the clearing, the doe spoke, her voice like the rustling of leaves. "Ambrogio, son of man, why have you come to me?" she asked. And so Ambrogio poured out his tale of woe, his voice cracking with despair as he spoke of Apollo's curse and his burning flesh. The doe listened patiently, her head tilted slightly to one side, her eyes never leaving Ambrogio's face. When he finished his tale, there was a long silence, broken only by the chirping of crickets. Finally, the doe spoke. "Ambrogio, your anguish touches even my immortal heart. I am Artemis, the huntress of the moonlit hours, and I shall help you." She then handed him a bow made of silver, its shaft smooth and polished, its string taut and humming with power. "This bow shall aid you," Artemis said, "but know this, its arrows are silver, meant only for beasts of darkness. Do not use them against your own kind, lest you invite the wrath of both gods and men." With the bow in his hands, Ambrogio felt a surge of hope. Perhaps he could still find a way to break Apollo's curse. But Artemis was not finished. She took a step closer, her eyes boring into Ambrogio's. "Ambrogio, I can grant you immortality, eternal life beyond the constraints of your mortal coil. You will become a being of the night, forever untouched by the sun's unforgiving rays. But this gift comes at a price, a heavy price." Her voice echoed with the solemnity of ages. Ambrogio hesitated. Immortality, the chance to escape Apollo's curse forever. But at what cost? What price could Artemis demand of him? "Tell me, Ambrogio," Artemis asked, her voice softer now, yet no less intense. "What is it that you thirst for most in this world?" Before Ambrogio could answer, a sudden wildness surged through him, a primal hunger that seemed to echo the very rhythm of the night. He didn't realize at first, but it was the sound of his own heart beating in sync with the pounding of his blood in his veins. It's a symphony of desire conducted by the moon's pale light. Instinctively, Ambrogio knew what he desired more than anything else in the world. "I want to be like you, Artemis," he whispered, his eyes fixed on the doe, a creature of the night, forever free from the sun's embrace. Artemis nodded slowly. "Very well, Ambrogio," she said, her voice grave. "Your wish is my command. But know this, once you accept this gift, there is no turning back. Your path is set in stone. your fate woven in the tapestry of the eternal night. Ambrogio swallowed hard, his throat dry. He understood the weight of his decision. If he accepted Artemis's offer, he would be forever altering the course of his existence. But what choice did he have? Apollo's curse burned within him, a constant reminder of his mortality. Taking a deep breath, Ambrogio met Artemis's gaze directly. I accept your offer, oh, goddess of the moon, he said, his voice echoing with newfound resolve. Then so be it, boomed Artemis, raising her silver bow. By the power vested in me, I grant you immortality. Drink from this chalice and become a creature of the eternal night. In his trembling hand, Ambrogio saw the chalice filled with a crimson liquid that shimmered like rubies in the moonlight. Its surface rippled as if alive with a dark energy that beckoned him forward. And so Ambrogio drank deeply from the chalice. At first, it felt like fire coursing through his veins, scorching his insides with 1,000 tiny daggers. But as the liquid slid down his throat and into his stomach, the sensation changed. It was as if ice-cold water had washed over him, numbing his senses and slowing his thoughts. While as the last drop of the crimson liquid hit his chest, a jolt of energy shot through him, making him gasp and stumble. His vision blurred for a moment, and when it cleared, the world looked different. The trees around him seemed to pulse with an eerie light, and the shadows seemed to dance with an unearthly grace. He could feel his body changing, growing stronger, faster, more resilient. And yet, amidst this surge of power, a dark awareness began to stir within him. He felt a primal hunger, a thirst for something he couldn't quite define. It was as if a beast had been unleashed within him, clawing at the bars of his human restraint. But Artemis's words echoed in his mind. Do not use them against your own kind, lest you invite the wrath of both gods and men. He struggled to maintain his humanity, to keep the beasts at bay. But how long could he resist? That night, under the watchful gaze of the moon, Ambrogio walked the earth as a being of the night. He roamed the forests and hills, testing his newfound strength and speed, reveling in the freedom from Apollo's curse. But all the while, the beast within him stirred, its presence growing stronger with each passing hour. And then it happened. One night, driven by an insatiable thirst, Ambrogio gave in to the beast within. He hunted down a young couple, a man and a woman, and drained their blood, drinking deeply from their life essence. And as the life ebbed from their eyes, a terrible realization dawned on Ambrogio. By drinking human blood, he had broken Artemis's most sacred command. Now, according to ancient laws, his soul would be forfeit to the gods. In the chilling dawnlight, Ambrogio looked into the lifeless eyes of his victims, his own eyes reflecting the horror of what he had done. His skin, once kissed by the sun, was now as pale as marble. His veins pulsed with a dark energy, and his reflection in the nearby stream was a ghastly sight, a mockery of his former self. His teeth were longer, sharper, and his eyes, once warm and inviting, were now cold and black, devoid of any human spark. And so, cursed by the gods and bound by his own choices, Ambrogio became the first vampire of Europe, condemned to walk the earth for eternity, avoiding the sunlight, whispering to the stars, and searching for Selena's soul, hoping for redemption, but knowing that true peace might forever elude his grasp. Story 3 in this series, we're reading, discussing, and reacting to stories from a horror anthology series called Tales from the Dark Multiverse. And this episode is called Cain, Marked by God, Feeder in the Dark. Let's get into it. Okay, so right off the bat, this story takes place in a world that is very similar to our own, with one major difference. In this world, Adam and Eve also had a third son named Abel, who was killed by his brother Cain. And as punishment, God cursed Cain to walk the earth forever, untouched by death, but hated by all. And he was marked, and the mark glowed like fire on his forehead. The story begins with a full-grown man, Cain, wandering through time and seeing humanity grow and flourish, yet never being able to join them. We see him during the days of Noah, for example, watching as the world ended and began again. It's watching people live and die and be born over and over and over again for thousands of years, while he remained stuck at the age that he was when he committed his crime, forever unable to pass on, because God did not want his offspring to inherit his curse. So all of the women that he slept with throughout time became pregnant and miscarried soon after waking up in the morning. One day, still unnamed, our protagonist comes across a small band of traveling nomads, and he goes with them for a time. Eventually, they reach an oasis surrounded by tall walls, and inside the walls is a thriving community of people living in harmony with nature, free from the pains of the outside world. He describes it like this: through the trees, he saw lights like fallen stars. There was laughter in the air, music and the murmur of voices telling stories under a sky filled with a million glittering eyes. And he thinks to himself, this is where I want to stay. This is where I can finally feel whole again. So he approaches the gate and asks to enter. Now, the elders of this community recognized him immediately as the infamous murderer, Cain, and they refused to let him in. But the villagers were younger and more compassionate, and they argued for letting him in, and they eventually agreed to let him stay if he would help them build a wall around their settlement to protect them from the dangers of the outside world. And, for a time, everything was good. He finally felt like he belonged somewhere, that maybe God wasn't completely against him. Then one night, while he was sleeping, he had a nightmare about killing his brother, and he woke up covered in sweat, and he started crying uncontrollably. And he stayed there on the ground for hours until the sun came up and the other villagers came out to start their day. They asked him what was wrong, and he told them, and they welcomed him to stay longer if he needed the time to recover. But he replied, I don't belong here. Even in my sleep, I am not at peace. What hope do I have? I need to keep moving. I cannot stay here any longer. And as he walked away, one of the villagers shouted, You are always welcome here, Cain. Do not think that because you are cursed, you are alone. And then another voice shouted, You are alone because you chose to be alone. You chose your fate. Nobody made you kill your brother. And he kept walking until he was sure he heard nothing more than the wind. Many hundreds of years later, he finds a cave filled with corpses whose blood has already begun to turn to wine. And he drinks from the corpse of a young woman and feels the life force of the dead flow through his veins. He says, for the first time since the voice of God boomed across the plains, he felt something other than grief, hot, powerful, exhilarating hunger. And as the centuries passed, the hunger grew, and eventually it became unbearable. So he wandered the world looking for food, but he couldn't bring himself to harm animals or plants. He just kept wandering. Then, one day, as he was crossing a barren plain, he came across a stranger standing beside a bubbling spring. The stranger turned and smiled at him and said, You are tired, weary traveler. Why don't you rest a while? And Cain says, I have nowhere to go, nothing to find, only hunger to assuage. And the stranger replied, There is something you can do. You can drink deep and know no more hunger. So he led him to a nearby tree where a bird had been impaled by a thorn, and he showed him how to rip out its heart and drink its blood. And Cain drank the warm blood, and the pain and sorrow left his body, and he felt strength course through his veins like fire. He thanked the stranger, introduced himself, and asked the stranger's name. And the stranger replied, I have many names, but you can call me Lucifer. And Lucifer told him that he knew what it was like to be banished from paradise and eternally damned to roam the earth. And he offered to teach him how to drink blood without killing the animal. So he took his hand and placed it on his chest and guided him to the spot where his heart should be. And he closed his eyes and concentrated and allowed Lucifer to pierce his skin. And Lucifer showed him how to draw blood without harming him. and then he drank the blood and felt it course through his veins, filling him with strength and power. And he thought, this is good. No more gnawing emptiness, no more longing. Finally, the pain is gone. He learned how to take blood from humans as well, and for hundreds of years, he roamed the earth, taking the blood he needed to survive, keeping the mark on his head hidden under a hood. And he tried to avoid populated areas, but sometimes he couldn't help himself. He would peek into windows and watch people eat and laugh and love, and he longed to join them. Sometimes he could unhelp himself, and he would walk into towns and cities and watch the crowds from afar, relishing in the fear that people felt when they saw his face. Eventually, he found a secluded valley where he lived for several decades, only coming out at night to feed. One night, he took blood from a young woman, and she survived, and she ran to her family and told them about the monster that attacked her, how it drained her of blood, leaving her weak and trembling. And her brothers vowed revenge, and they found his cave and confronted him. But he fought them both, and slew them and drank their blood. Then he wandered the earth once again, until one day he came across a dense forest and decided to go in for a little stroll. And he came across a clearing where a group of people were gathered around a fire. And he watched as they played games and sang songs and told stories, and he wanted to join them, but he couldn't. So instead, he hid in the trees and watched them until they all fell asleep. Then he crept closer to the fire and took a small amount of blood from each person, and he did not wake them. And from that moment on, those people worshipped him as a god, and they invited him to come and share their lives, and he accepted. Okay, and for the next several hundred years, he lived among them, teaching them about the world beyond the forest and warning them about the dangers that lay ahead. Okay, and they thrived under his guidance, and eventually he helped them build a great city, which they named Cain. And he had 3 children with a young woman named Lilith, and they were the first generation of vampires. But eventually, his own children turned against him and drove him out of the city. And he fled to a cave and slept there for several hundred years until he awoke to find that humanity had returned to worshiping him as a god. And now they call him Father Night, and they beg for him to take their blood every night, and he does. Then, one day, one of the elders asked him when the time would come when he would allow humanity to stop sacrificing themselves to him. And he replied, "When the world bleeds enough, I will sleep beneath the earth in a coffin made of stone and guarded by curses and silence. And one day soon, it will be time." And that is the end of part 2. Part 3 will be released on October. I'm excited because I've already read it, and it's really, really good. That's all I'm gonna say. If you enjoyed this story, make sure you check out the corresponding episode on DC Universe Infinite, okay? And if you enjoyed this video, please hit that thumbs up button below.